Hi guys, and welcome to my top 100 films of all time ranking. Now, there was a logic to how I went about selecting these movies. So if you've been following the channel a while, you'll be aware that I've been doing these videos where basically I bounce from year to year, ranking all my favourite films from each calendar year. I started with 1971 and I worked my way up to 2022. And the idea was that I would take my top 2 favourite films from each year, and that would form the basis of my top 100, and then I'd just jig them around a bit to get my exact order of films. I've got cold feet a little bit in the last few days about using that format. So what I've decided to do ultimately is to use that as a template. I've still written down those 100 films that should have made the final, but I've only kept about maybe 75 of them in place, and I've taken out about 25 that, when I think about it, I don't really want them to be in my top 100, even though they technically qualified. So I've replaced those films with 25 other films, 25 wildcard picks, if you like, films that I do really want to be in my top 100, and that is going to form the basis of my final list. So I've sort of stuck with the original plan. I've just jigged it a little bit. I've just, allowed a bit of wriggle room just to reshape things the way that I feel like they should be in order to produce the absolute most accurate top 100 films for me. And I don't think there's anything else worth saying before we start. I am a big horror fan, so there is a slight tilt towards the horror genre throughout this list, although certainly a lot of different genres are represented here. And please don't beat me up for any of my picks. This is just a personal list. By all means, if you can be bothered, put your top 100 films in the comments, although that would be a hell of a lot of work. I'm not going to go through the entire list today. As it says on the thumbnail, I'm just going to go from 100 to 81. I'm going to split this into 5 videos, and I'll just try and put them out as quickly as I can. I'm a busy man, but I'm going to try and get through this as fast as possible in the weeks ahead. And let that be the end of the waffle. Let's get into it, and we'll start with the film that I consider to be my 100th favourite film of all time. Coming in at number 100, just sneaking in by the skin of its teeth, is Carrie. This is the only Stephen King adaptation in my entire ranking, I think. I have read the original novel by King. It's a little bit awkwardly structured, but still really good, but the film flows much better. This is an excellent horror drama. So many great characters, obviously Carrie herself, but I also like the friends who help her get to the prom, that teacher who's really nice to her. Such a horrific ending as well, really tragic. I'm talking about the bit at the school. There's also that confrontation with the mother back at Carrie's house that's still to come after that. Such an awesome film. I've never seen any of the sequels or remakes. I think there's about 4 or 5 different versions of Carrie, if you count all of them. Carrie 2 The Rage came out at some point. Never seen that. As far as I'm concerned, you only need one Carrie, and that is the 70s original. At number 99, I have Wolf Creek, a film so good I was willing to spend £4 whole on it. That is a lot of money in today's cost of living affected landscape, but Wolf Creek's an awesome movie. It's about these 3 backpackers who are heading north through the deserty part of Australia, and they come across this weirdo in a truck, and I don't think I need to say anything more, do I? You can imagine the horrors that happen after that. I particularly like the personality of the main killer, Mick Taylor, is that his name? It's been a while since I saw it. Just a phenomenally good film. The pacing is perfect. The tension is just allowed to build and build throughout the first half, and then you get the horror late on. This film was so good it spawned 1 sequel, a TV series that's had 2 seasons to date, I think. This is probably the best Australian horror film of all time, in my opinion. It would be my absolute ultimate nightmare, I think, if I was travelling through Australia and I broke down and suddenly this dude turned up and just said, "What the bloody hell are you buggers doing out here?" At 98, we have Ad Astra. This is a sci-fi space film. There's quite a few that are like that in this ranking. This one stars Brad Pitt. He plays an astronaut who finds out that they've lost contact with his dad, who's also an astronaut, somewhere near Neptune or somewhere So Pitt has to go on this big, long space voyage, and the closer he gets to his destination, the more desolate space seems to become. But there's so many great sequences along the way. There's a moon buggy chase, which is kind of cool, and there's this one bit where Pitt finds this derelict spaceship and there's like a killer ape floating around it or something like that. It's just a really great film, and it looks the business. Visually, it's just absolutely spectacular. I need to buy this one, actually. I don't own a Blu-ray for this one yet. At number 97, we have the Chernobyl Diaries. I've always had a morbid fascination with the Chernobyl incident. When they released that Chernobyl drama series a few years ago, I couldn't wait to watch it, and in fact I digested all 5 episodes extremely quickly. This movie definitely benefits from having such an intimate connection with the real life incident. You know, this film is actually set in Pripyat, where Chernobyl happened, and they actually filmed some scenes there in the town. Not many, but enough to convince you that the rest of the movie is also happening right there in Pripyat. And it's a well-written horror film anyway. You know, even if this film wasn't connected to Chernobyl, I still think it would be a little bit of a favourite of mine. There's a really good build-up. You've got these 5 or 6 teenagers from America. They hire this tourist guide from the Ukraine to sneak them into the Chernobyl area, and once they're there, there's so many threats. Like, there's the threat from the radiation itself. There are wolves and bears floating around. There's these weird guys with bald heads who are possibly old descendants from people who lived in Pripyat back in the 80s. There's also soldiers who absolutely will take umbrage to these Americans having got into the area when they shouldn't be there. So there's threats all over the place, and it's a lot of fun watching how this film plays out. I think it's absolutely awesome. And the character of Dmitry, he's the Ukrainian tourist guide who sneaks these kids into the area. Just an absolutely brilliant character. I absolutely love him. At 96, we have Demons. I've always been a massive fan of this, and to a slightly lesser extent its sequel. A while back I bought a double pack of Demons 1 and 2. This is an Arrow release. I think this cost me like £30 actually, but for me personally, well worth it, because I just love this film. The practical effects in this are amazing. So the film's about a group of people who get trapped in a cinema, and one by one they all start getting turned into demons. It's a lot better than it sounds, honestly. I first saw this at school, so it was the last day of term. I think it would have been year 10, which in the UK means kids of roughly the ages of maybe 14 and 15. But the teacher basically said, okay, because it's the last day of term tomorrow, somebody wants to bring in a movie, you can watch that, and that's fine. But somebody just randomly brought in Demons. So in the middle of a sunny afternoon in class, we're just watching this horrifically violent Italian horror film, and it was kind of odd, but that's what generated my lifelong love of the movie. There's one character in this I absolutely love, Tony the Pimp. He's just so funny. I love all of his dialogue. The guy who plays Tony, honestly, he's got one of my favourite voices in all of cinema. Check out Demons if you've never seen it, but maybe try and find a cheaper way to watch it than shelling out for this Arrow Blu-ray. At number 95, we have Back to the Future. I think I used to have a 3-disc DVD box set of this, but I couldn't find it today. I think I gave it away at some point, sadly. Another thing to say is that even though I've put the first film into the ranking today and none of the others, I kind of like all 3 films the same. In fact, years ago, I might have even said that the second film was my favourite. I thought it was really clever what they did in that one with the trip to the future, and then they go back to the 50s and start overwriting a load of stuff that happened in the first movie. But I've definitely got more of a spiritual connection to the first movie. That's the only one that I saw in cinemas. I was only about 4 at the time, and I'm pretty sure I understood nothing about the plot being so young. I just remember thinking it was fun, all the stuff that Marty was getting up to, you know, driving around in that fancy DeLorean and tipping loads of manure on top of the bullies and stuff like that. And also, this first film is actually the only film that technically qualified for this grand final, because I think it won my 1984 rankings. But one of the things I like about Back to the Future as well It's never been tampered with, you know, it's never been rebooted. There's been no pointless sequels like 30 years later on with a lot of the original actors missing or anything like that. It's been left exactly as it was meant to have been left. And I think my favourite character in the whole thing is George McFly. Lorraine, you're my density. I mean, my destiny. Number 94, we have The House on Sorority Row. Now, this film has definitely been helped today by the fact that I saw it back in the 90s, and it scared me quite a bit, actually, as a young teenager. Had I not had that experience with it back then, maybe we wouldn't be talking about it in this video, but the fact is, I did, and we are. But even after buying the Blu-ray, like just a few years ago actually, and reacquainting myself with it, I think it really stands up as one of the best slasher films from that golden era in the early 80s. It's got a great concept for a villain with the clown outfit, and the soundtrack's really strong. The main final girl is really good. I'm surprised I've never seen anything else of that actress, actually. I think her name's Kathleen McNeil, maybe. It's just a really, really strong slasher film if you're into that sort of thing. So yeah, very pleased that this has made it into this list today. At number 93, we have Evil Things. I can guarantee you that this is the most obscure film in this entire ranking. I doubt anyone apart from me has ever seen this film. I doubt anyone apart from me has ever even heard of this film. I bet even the director and actors who made this film have ever seen this film. I bet they just finished shooting it and sent it off to be edited and they never actually watched it. But it really is an undiscovered gem. It's about this group of teenagers. Well, they're probably maybe slightly older than that. They start off in New York and they go on this road trip to a lodge somewhere wintry in the middle of nowhere. I don't think it's far from New York. But on the way there, they get pursued by this weirdo in a truck or a van. He's got this camcorder. It feels like Steven Spielberg's Duel, but set at night in icy conditions. Then later on, we get more than a whiff of Blair Witch Project during these scenes that take place in some woods near the lodge. And the finale, it's hair-raising. Like there's this one scene where the killer, we see things from his perspective as he's just slowly walking around hunting for victims, and we just pray that he doesn't come across somebody hiding behind a door or something like that. And the killer's making these weird noises while he's hunting. I think this film might be a little bit abstract for some people because you don't get all the answers by the end of the film that maybe you would want, but given that this was shot in just 7 days, I think it's an unbelievably good film for its budget. Well done, Dominic Perez. Check this out, by the way, if you've never seen it before. At number 92, we've got Heat. So a bit of a crime thriller here, sandwiched in between all the horrors. I think I've had this 2-disc DVD of this for almost 20 years now. Heat is about a cop played by Al Pacino who is trying to track down a gang of bank robbers helmed by Robert De Niro, and he's got Val Kilmer in there and Tom Sizemore. Really well written film. It's got 2 outstanding sequences in it for me. One where the cops and the bank robbers are basically having this massive shootout in the middle of the city. I forget which city this film takes place in. And also at the back end of the film, the final duel between De Niro and Pacino at an airfield is extremely well staged. I don't want to sound like a snob, but this is proper action blockbuster movie making before CGI came along and just made everything too in your face and unrealistic looking. You know, this is really serious, down to earth filmmaking, and I just think it really shines even today. My favourite quote from this film, my dad used to say it all the time. There's a moment where Al Pacino is taking the piss out of someone, and I can't remember the context in which he says it, but he just makes some kind of reference like, because she's got a great ass. And I don't know why he says it, but my dad used to just randomly say it all the time, and I can't think of this film without thinking of that particular line of dialogue. At number 91, we have Creep. I reckon a few more people will have heard of this one than Evil Things, but it's still fairly obscure, I'd say. And in fact, this isn't even the most well-known horror film called Creep. I think there's another film of the same title about a schizophrenic guy or something. I don't know, I've never seen it, but for me, this version of Creep from 2004 that's set in the London Underground, that is the only version that I'm interested in. In this, we follow a woman played by Franca Potente. She's the same actress who was Bourne's girlfriend in some of those early Bourne movies. She's trying to get a train very late at night, but she misses it, and she ends up getting trapped in the underground train station, and she wanders into some service tunnels or something, and she ends up getting followed by this freaky guy who's basically lived under the ground his entire life. He can't even speak, this guy, and he looks all mutated and what have you. So it's mostly a chase movie through underground train tunnels, but it's extremely exciting. This film, it's just very well made. I think I've owned it since the noughties. It's one that I go back to every now and again. It's just very, very damn good. At number 90, we have Hell Night, easily Linda Blair's best film, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. I'm sorry, but given a choice between watching The Exorcist and Hell Night, I would go for Hell Night every single time. I will admit that, similar to The House on Sorority Row, my love for Hell Night mostly comes from the fact that I watched it in the 90s at a time when I was susceptible to being scared by such films. I've loved it ever since. I bought the DVD many, many years ago, I think, and then I upgraded to the Blu-ray that I currently have. If you don't know, this is a film about a group of university students who get challenged to spending the night in an abandoned mansion, but what they don't know is that two psychopathic brothers still live under the ground, underneath this mansion. They're a bit freaky looking. They're not far off the mutant from Creep, to be honest. It's a genuinely well-made slasher film from an era where they really knew what they were doing with that particular subgenre. And just to demonstrate how much I love Hell Night, I spent £16 on this Blu-ray upgrade. And this was a film I already owned on DVD. At number 89, we have another non-horror one. It is Taken with Liam Neeson. This is about some kind of ex-special forces guy who travels to Paris to rescue his daughter, who has been kidnapped by Albanian gangsters. But I just love this character, Brian Mills. He just takes no shit from anyone. I seriously did not expect this film to be as good as it was. There's a scene in Rocky IV when Rocky's trainer, is it Tony, the black guy who used to be Creed's trainer? He just starts rubbing the top of Paulie's head because he's so excited at what he's watching, i.e. Rocky starting to fight back against Drago, against all the odds. When I was watching Taken, I just felt like I just wanted a Paulie next to me so I could frantically rub his head because I was so excited at watching Mills just completely dismantle all these bad guys. It's surreal when you watch this for the first time. So I love Taken, not that enamoured with Taken 2, but it's okay, number 2. Number 3, absolutely dreadful. At number 88, we have The Ring, the American version. I have seen the Japanese version, I just prefer this one, mainly I think because Naomi Watts is so good in this film. So if you don't know, this is about a woman who watches this freaky videotape, and anyone who watches this tape is basically sentenced to die within 7 days. It is a supernatural chiller, this, but the core mystery is very well written. The answers when they come are extremely satisfying. If I've got one minor quibble, so the signature scene in this film is when this girl crawls out of a well and comes through with this TV screen. I don't think they filmed that quite as well as they could have done, mainly because there are a couple of annoying cutaways to another character, but it's a very small thing. The film as a whole is absolutely excellent. It really gets the hairs standing up on your skin. I have seen The Ring 2, but I don't remember it at all. The fact that I barely remember it, though, tells me that it probably didn't have that much impact on me. I've never seen the third film. At some point, I will have to go back through this entire trilogy, maybe do some reviews, but this first Ring film, absolute bee's knees. At number 87, we have Silence of the Lambs. I did buy this once, but I accidentally left it in a cafe about half an hour after I'd bought it. So somebody out there got themselves a free copy of Silence of the Lambs on me. Whoever you are, no hard feelings, I guess. You're welcome. A lot of people don't actually think this is a horror film. I personally do, although I guess for the purpose of this particular ranking, it doesn't really matter. But you certainly get two classic horror villains in this, Buffalo Bill and Hannibal Lecter. They don't meet each other during this film at all, but they're both so good. The final pursuit of Clarice through the dark house is really memorable, and the entire story, to be honest, from beginning to end, is just absolutely engrossing, albeit there's lots of violent images to get through in this film. I kind of like the second one as well, Hannibal. I know a lot of people don't, but that one that was directed by Ridley Scott, I think it's almost as good as this one. But certainly, I think for most people, me included, Silence of the Lambs will always be the kingpin of this particular franchise. It's almost a perfect film. It's got so many quotable lines in it as well, most of them from Hannibal himself, Anthony Hopkins and Jodie Foster. Absolutely terrific. Yeah, absolute classic film. At number 86, we have Get Carter. This is a British gangster film from the early 70s. It was the winner of my first ever rankings video in this series. So I began with 1971 and Get Carter came out on top that particular day. This is a film about a London gangster played by Michael Caine who goes up to Newcastle to avenge his brother's death, but he kind of underestimates just how many threats are going to be in waiting for him. He doesn't quite know how things are done up north, all those Biter Grove kids, they're bloody hard, But Caine, he comes up against so many interesting characters in the underworld, and there are so many great quotes in this. I think one of my favourites is when he says to this one guy at a racetrack, "You've got the same old eyes that I remember. Same old piss holes in the snow." Really cool film, Get Carter. It was remade many, many years later with Sly Stallone in the lead role, but I've never seen it. I've heard it's absolutely terrible. When it comes to this film, you only need the original, believe me. Number 85, we have Scarface. There was a time when I was a lot younger when I would have considered this my favourite film ever. That is not the case now. It's definitely slipped down a bit over the years, hence why it's in this spot today, but I was still very, very keen to at least keep it in the top 100. I think it at least deserves that because of the impact that it had on me when I was younger. The film is about a gangster played by Al Pacino. Well, he just starts out as a random immigrant from Cuba just flipping burgers, but throughout the course of the movie, he builds himself up and he becomes like the biggest cocaine guy in all of America, and he ends up living in a mansion with like 20 guards and what have you. But his world comes crashing down. It's just not sustainable. He's an absolute twat, this character, and yet somehow you still end up rooting for him. I still listen to some of the tunes on this film from time to time. This film definitely influenced all those like Grand Theft Auto games from the PS2 era. You watch this film, you can just see like GTA Vice City and GTA 3. It's really noticeable, but this is definitely one of Al Pacino's best ever performances, in my opinion, and he's done a fair few. Number 84, we have Saving Private Ryan. This is a very emotional war film starring Tom Hanks. There's an amazing opening sequence where all these Allied soldiers arrive on the beach and they just get completely mown down for the most part. Some of them get to the back of the beach and take over the German pillboxes, so they still win the battle, but at an extreme cost. I think a lot of people probably remember the guy on the beach with his guts hanging out and he's begging for his mum and stuff. This is back in the days when you wouldn't get violence this explicit in mainstream Hollywood movies. If this film came out today, maybe you'd forget about that moment by the time you come out of the cinema, but back then it was quite extreme, I think, late 90s. And the part I remember, maybe even more than that, is just when the boats arrive, the soldiers are just about to get off and they just get mown down with machine gun bullets in the actual boats. These people have been through all that training and they don't even get more than 2 seconds of combat. They literally stood no chance. It does make you think that these scenes might have played out for real once. And there's another emotional scene right near the end of the film that always gets me every time I watch this film. There's a soldier who just gets this knife slowly plunged into him by a German soldier while he's begging for his life, and it just really sums up war for me. It's a very, very powerful film, very long film, but it's got classic status, surely. At number 83, I've got Fellowship of the Ring. I've got a long history with Lord of the Rings. My dad bought me the novel when I was 12, and I can fondly recall lying in bed at night trying to get through this massive tome of a book, and I don't think I ever actually got to the end, even though I tried several times. In terms of the movies, I did buy the DVD box set some years ago. I've never upgraded it, and actually the last time I tried to watch it, it is starting to look a little bit grainy now compared to like HD Blu-ray stuff. But it's a classic trilogy. The first movie in particular, I'm really fond of. Like, Fellowship of the Ring is the only one that's got into this top 100. I like the second and the third films as well, but what I like especially about the first one is just that it's a linear adventure. It's just one group of people on one long continuous journey. There's no distractions or anything like that. It's just a great fantasy adventure. Second and third films, they're good, but you've got characters here, there and everywhere all over the place. It starts to feel like a little bit of a TV show type feel. I just think the first one is head and shoulders above the rest, and in terms of the Hobbit films, the first one's all right, but the second and third just start to get on my nerves. It's a much inferior trilogy to the Lord of the Rings one. At number 82, we have Sicario. This is a Denis Villeneuve film starring Emily Blunt, Josh Brolin, Benicio del Toro. It's about the FBI cracking down on drug running between Mexico and the United States, and a lot of the plot takes place down near that border, actually. It's very similar to another film from 2000 called Traffic, which, coincidentally or not, also starred Benicio del Toro. Traffic, by the way, almost made my top 100. It's a great film. It's almost like a companion piece to Sicario, really. It just looks at the same subject matter, but from a slightly different angle, or three. But Sicario's superb. I've still never seen Sicario 2. I've had my eye on a 4K set of Sicario 1 and 2 for quite some time, but because it's £30, I keep kind of putting it off, and I'm sure one day I'll get around to it. But for now, no, I've still not seen the sequel, although I know that Emily Blunt's not in the second one. But this is a really, really cool film. It absolutely deserved to make more money than it did. I'd like to see more movies like this that are not completely obsessed with $50 million CGI sequences. That they just want to be good thrillers that are grounded and realistic, and this is absolutely that. It's sort of like a film from 20 years ago, maybe, but with Denis Villeneuve's more modern day sensibilities and sheen. It's got to watch this one. It's really cool. Finally, today, before we take a break, we've got The Great Escape at 81. This is a film I've seen periodically throughout my life. My first experience of it, though, was not with the film, but with the theme tune, because during the 80s, I had an Amstrad computer, and I had this game on it called Who Dares Wins 2, which used the theme tune from The Great Escape. And then at some point, I watched The Great Escape, probably because my dad had it on. He was really into war films, and I heard the theme tune, and I was like, that's from Who Dares Wins 2, and probably naively for a while, I thought the video game had done it first, but this is surely one of the best war films ever made. It's about a group of American and British prisoners who are relocated to this really tough prison camp in Germany during World War II. And I guess for the first half of this film, they're trying to escape it. And then the second half of the film, once a lot of them have got out, they're then trying to escape Germany itself, which actually proves to be even harder to escape from than the prison camp. I think the tragedy of this film is that had the prisoners all stayed in the same place and just made no escape attempts, they might have actually lived beyond the war, but because they saw it as their duty to try and escape, a lot of them ended up suffering tragic deaths. But there's so many great characters in this. The most famous one is obviously Steve McQueen's guy, Hiltz, his character name, and you've got Donald Pleasance in there as well, and there's at least a dozen really cool characters in this film, I'd say. There's so many. Charles Bronson's in there. And there's a thing that Hiltz does in this. Whenever he's captured and put into like the solitary cell, he bounces this ball against the wall, hits the floor first, off the wall and back into his hands. And because I saw him doing that in this film, like, every now and again throughout my life, when the situation arises, I will do that exact same thing. Floor, wall, back into the hand. Yeah, just because of The Great Escape. Anyway, that's all for today. I'm going to end it here. I'll be back very, very soon to carry on with this ranking. Next time we will pick things up with number 80. Until next time, cheerio, bye-bye.